All right, so these three brothers, the main ones that you read about, Gio, Aldo, and Dino. They are real brothers who you knew, right?
Yes, yes. I mean, obviously not the same name, but
right. So
and
I'm
I
assuming
wanted all the male
Gio.
characters to have names that ended in O, just to give it a little kind of flavoring.
Okay. So Gio is the
Gino.
Gino. Sorry, not Gio, not the twin,
Yeah.
not the twin. Gino. He's the most hardened criminal of the three middle brothers.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I got this really great quote. I want to read it. At the very end, not his end. Um, I love what you did with him, by the way. Made him to like a little fat bastard. Which, because like I know guys like that. They're like really tough in high school, or whatever, and they've grown up and they're just like they let themselves go and they're disgusting. Anyways, at the what you call almost the climax after Gino and Joey Frigo maybe,
Greco.
they go into the facility. They think that they're gonna go kill Dario Sandoval, but they've been set up twice basically by Delaguardo and also Big Frank. And,
Yeah.
Delaguardo doesn't know about that. At the very end, they do all the violence. They go through it. The very last paragraph. I guess if you haven't read this before, if you haven't read this in a long time, obviously, then I think you should hear it again. The very last one is, but these are just thoughts, germane thoughts for a change, to be sure. For one, the likes of Gino, but that's all they were. They solved nothing. They did not ease his breast. As he made his way back into the night, Gino could see the outline of Joey's form waving to him, and he waved back, happy as could be, still covered in blood. As he dragged himself into the nakedness of the aftermath, he saw Joey's face and did not share his joy. But before he let Joey ruin the moment, he turned elsewhere and, for a reason beyond his kin, longed for some greater mind or soul to inspect it all, to lick his wounds like some mother wolf to her ailing cub, even as part of him sought to devour the meaning of it all. This still to be formed violence that he brought into a world beyond meaning and intent. Um, yeah, I thought that was a very good way to end that whole thing. To have him, he's like enraptured with what he's just done, and you still have the Joey's still very cautious. He still thinks like, dude, man, we're being set up. He like basically knows it the whole time.
Well,
it's a great image.
I think at the very beginning when I described Gino, I might have said it within the book. I know I've said it outside of the book that if this would ever be filmed, it has to be a black and white film, because when you get to read A Norwegian Family, that's 1960s Technicolor. But this is the dirty 1970s, gritty. It has to be black and white. And I think I have a great scene where I describe Gino's face and how ugly he is physically.
Yeah.
And Gino is more like an animal. The real Gino did some of the stuff reputedly, from what I heard, that I based Gino on, but he was a shorter guy. He was an ugly guy, but he was. There was a television show in the 1970s called Welcome Back, Kotter, and there was a character called Juan Epstein, and Epstein was a Puerto Rican guy who was on the short side, who was supposedly the toughest kid in school. And so Gino, in a sense, is like that. I knew the real Gino before that show came on, but just to give a cultural reference point, so Gino was one of those things, and then he sort of disappeared. The real life Gino. The story was that he had gone to jail, or that he had been killed or something. I do not know whatever happened to the real Gino. I don't know what happened to the real Dino. I have, however, found the real Aldo. I haven't contacted him, but I have found the real life Aldo, and he's not in particularly great shape from what I can tell, in terms of his own personal history, but I won't go into any further detail. But the Gino character, he's a good example of a character that's not likable, but everyone has known a genotype. It might have been a bad boss who was a Gino. There might have been a former lover that was a Gino. But and not again to that extreme, the murderous raping extreme. He also there's that great scene where he rapes Aldo's ex-girlfriend. Um, but
Cindy.
yeah, a good part of it, Gino, too, I did base upon this great film by Luchino Visconti called what is it? Rocco and His Brothers. And there were three main characters there. Now that's one of the reasons that I decided to also use that as a basis. There were a couple of scenes, like a scene in a restaurant that's also similar to Rocco and His Brothers, where Gino isn't granted a seat with his girlfriend Cindy McGee, I believe is her name. Um, uh, and so Gino is a patchwork of the real Gino, some of what happened in this Rocco and His Brothers film, and then just other stuff that just naturally came.
So in the very beginning of the book, you say that Dino's your favorite. So, and I guess in the real life, you spent a lot of time with Dino.
Yeah, and there's the scene with Dino and the handball, which was a real scene that happened from life. Remember the handball scene with Dino?
Yeah, with Spalding and his friend.
Yeah, and that is a takeoff of a great John Berryman poem, the Ball poem. If you Google the Ball poem by John Berryman, you'll see how I took that and the real life incident, and I used that as, again, that's sort of like that spider in the corner watching Big Frank fucking.
That's interesting. That's fascinating. Yeah, I enjoyed that scene. It's too bad about Aldo. I was hoping you to tell me that you knew where Dino was and he was still alive. I really liked him by the very end. I liked at the very end how the final chapter was for him, because he had gotten some of the least screen time.
Well, because he was also 3 or 4 years younger than both Aldo and my doppelganger Manny Cole. Me, Gino was 2 or 3 years older, and so he was the little brother, and he seemed to be the one on track to, if not a great life, at least a bit more of a normal life. Whatever's happened to him, I could not say in real life.
Well, I think as a reader, I really appreciated how he was the end, the capstone. He was basically the end of it, and he could wrap things up. I really liked how he met Gino's little bastard. I can't remember his name. Oh, Leonardo. Yeah, I like how he met Leonardo.
I forgot about that detail, so it's interesting to learn about that again. And that's a character that now that you mention it, who knows? I don't think I'm ever going to have Gino ever appear. He's mentioned by some characters here that later, the last novel that I did, called The Grand and the Glorious, one of the two major characters is Joey Greco, and Joey Greco, we see him 40 some years later, 40, 45, 50 years later from the events of the Vincetti brothers, as he takes over the Maravelli crime family and basically ends it by his own incompetence and certain other things. But a character like that, Leonardo, this is one of those things that when I'm an old man and I'm looking for, I'm like, I don't have any ideas. I go, oh, maybe I should pick up on that Leonardo character, which again I totally forgot. But I've also, this is why it's good to create this kind of universe of characters. In modern times, especially with the Marvel shit and these comic book characters, it's way overdone because very few of the characters have any depth, and those that have some kind of depth are just pounded into the ground, by things like, how many iterations of the Joker and Batman do you need? How many iterations of Lois Lane and Superman do you need? Or of Bruce Banner and the fucking Hulk? It's like these are juvenile characters. Big Frank is a far scarier character than, what is it, Thanos or something, in the Marvel universe, because the chances of there being a real Thanos in going around with universal kind of power is next to nil. I mean, if you look at the Star Trek universe, there's things called like the Q that are supposed godlike creatures or something. Maybe there could be something like that, but some kind of creature like that, why would they even bother with that? But on our level of existence, you want to avoid the Gino Vincettis and the Norwegians and the Big Frank Conchettos of the world, because they could really do you damage. Whereas a character like, Thanos is just, mythological bullshit, tried to make modern. There's no child has nightmares of a Thanos. But if you met or you read this book, there's a good chance that you might have some kind of idea of Gino Vincetti coming after you.
Mm. Yeah, I thought it was very fascinating. Yeah, Big Frank was very fascinating. I thought it was cool how I think maybe I'm wrong, and maybe I'm not sure if you remember, but you have two World War II stories basically. No, there's a third one. There's that old drunk man who throws beer cans at people out the window. There's that man, and it's not told by him. It's told by somebody else. But you had this one World War II story from a vet who was in the Aleutians. Was that the Aleutians?
Yeah, and he gets his head blown
Uh,
off.
right, but yeah, the guy gets his head blown off. But that's more of like a more heroic story you hear. That's get the job done, and we're all very, the one guy, he's very heroic. He gets his head blown off, but yeah, he is heroic or whatever he is. And then you have later you have Big Frank's story, and Big Frank's is almost the complete opposite, where there's no heroism, where they try to rape that Japanese girl, and then he ends up murdering the lieutenant and everything.
And
And I was
and
like,
actually
wow, yeah. What you say about Thanos, you're right, but the whole that probably happened in World War II. I could totally see that happening.
well, I did base that on a documentary I saw, the whole illusions thing, and the CBs that Big Frank was on. And in fact, I have the formation, probably the next major big novel of several 100,000 words that I will take on. Like my next book, after I get through, I'm doing now Jason and the Argonauts and Medea plays alternating with poet plays. But once I get done with them, my next book is probably going to be a children's book about my youngest cat and her obsession with this moth that comes to the window. But the next big book might very well be this World War II book, because I want to go back to the Big Frank thing and not focus on Big Frank, but maybe the captain or his commanding officer that Big Frank kills in a very gruesome way, and have that character's brother trying to investigate how his brother really died. So that would be my into that book. And this is again where having an artistic, a creative universe comes in. But those particular incidents, like that one about the guy getting his head blown off, was literally from a documentary that I saw on the Battle of Atu and the Battle of Sitka in the Aleutians. It's the only World War II battle that ever took place on American soil, North American soil, and I mean, there was some bombs that were thrown onto California by the Japanese, but there was no actual battle between the Japanese and Americans. But again, it's one of those things. I did not plan that, but in the course of writing this book, I said, I probably got 20 some chapters out of the 64. And I said, I need a few other chapters, and let me go to World War II, because Big Frank was born in, I think, 25, so he's the perfect age to have gone to war. And similarly too, I have the World War II background with the Nazi invasion of Norway. That gives us Ronald Holdvand, who's the Norwegian.
Right. Yeah, no, yeah. I love the World War II scenes are really great. I actually forgot I was reading a crime novel, or whatever you want to call it, semi-crime novel. Crime novel is not a crime novel. I forgot it was. It's like, it felt like a actual World War II history, an actual account. It was very interesting. One of the things I really like about the Vincetti brothers and the other stuff you sent me to, but especially they all kind of have this, is that they're obviously they're not just novels, but they seem to also be really great textbooks for a lot of things. And part of it is like the Aleutians. I didn't know that part about American history at all. Never heard about that. And it chronicles little bits of history and also pop culture. I remember in True Life, you went on one of the stories. You focused really on not so much on Watergate. Maybe there was one on Watergate with Nixon, but also something he did in the '60s, maybe something he did to another politician, maybe.
Well,
And it's no, again,
Richard
it's a
Nixon
textbook.
figures into the next book, the A Norwegian and the Family. There's a couple of great chapters with Richard Nixon in it, so you'll enjoy that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I like how you've done this, where it's like it's more than just it's definitely not a conventional novel, and I like how you not only you weave in some history and pop culture and a lot of these things that I had no idea about, but also your opinions on art and things like that. I actually have a great quote. Speaking of which, I'm not sure what page it's on, but I can just read a little bit of it. It's you're talking about art and what makes great art, and literature is the highest, and then poetry is higher than that a little bit. First, one should acknowledge. Let me start a little further. And this is a good question as it raises an even better question. What exactly is the book's main narrative of the Vincetti brothers? Indeed, what is its goal and why am I writing it? First, one should acknowledge that all art, and I would argue that literature is the highest form of art, for it is the most reliant on the least mere squiggles on some medium, as well as dependent on a good percipient, as well as about communication. It's about how something is communicated, not the thing communicated. It is that art is a verb, not a noun, in its most essential form. Yes, one can have a great idea, but if it is communicated poorly, it is not great art. And one can have great technical skill and accomplishment, but sans a great idea, it is not great art. Um, Again, it's like you're reading my brain or something. It seems like that idea. It seems so obvious. It's so obvious. Like why would that not? Those two things, a great idea and great skill, come together to form something fantastic. But it seems like nowadays people don't care. It's like they have a good idea and then they never try to improve their writing, or their writing's pretty good, but they just write about the same things that they've written about time and time again.
Well, I've said many times, when I argue about art, and I think the long view, people in 50 or 60 years, once I'm long dead, they're going to look back and they're going to say, this guy was so much better than the people who were being published and lauded in their day. The things he say are not only true, they are obviously true. How could people be this stupid? And I think it will be black intellectuals, it'll be women intellectuals, feminists, because what I'm saying, this is why art transcends all this bullshit politics of the day, is that what you just quoted is obviously true. It's not, there's not even a question of it not being true. Art is not political. It can be political, but it doesn't have to essentially be political. And I think I've said it before, and I might have said it in that book, if you say all art is political, I can say all art is about poodles. And using the term about poodles is just as valid in any question you're going to say about art. All art is about poodles. Yes, well, if you don't write about this or whatnot, people will often say, well, all art is about politics, and if you're not talking about politics, you're really talking about politics, and you're not talking about it. And I can say, well, all art is about poodles, and if you don't mention poodles in your art, you are still talking about poodles in your lack of mentioning about poodles. It's absurd. It's the way people they twist and gyre themselves into all of these things to try to put forth these ideas that are not unique to them. And a lot of what I've written about, the things that I posit, they don't generate solely from me. Some do. The idea of my writing style in this book, total immersion, that's unique to me, to soak you totally in. And there are a number of other things. But when I talk about techniques I use, like the spider up in the corner watching Big Frank fucking, that is not something that is unique to me, and I'm not going to claim it's unique to me. But I do that, and I do it better than other people have done it, because it will reach into you and it will make you remember these moments. And these asides, these breakings of the fourth wall, other people have done that in all other types of media. But are they necessary? Are they done well? Or are they just someone being didactic? I am never didactic. There are some works that some people have read of mine where they'll say, "Oh, that's didactic." For example, I did a kids book, and I've done two versions of it: just the plain kids book, and then the more adult version, where I do have two characters talking about what's going on in the book. but it's not so that they can be didactic to lead someone in. It's to give a basis of the character and give the stupidity of your average character and the parallax between the simplicity of what's going on in this children's book and how some people, one of the two characters that are in conversation about that book, is not that bright. But other people who don't, who just read it, who've read it the first time, think that I'm being didactic, but it's not. I'm never going to talk down to you or any person. So if you see something that seems to me to be didactic, think again and step back from your own prejudice and look at it fresh.